Cornell University requires students to take mandatory flu shots, then exempts BIPOC students from the mandate. Way to inoculate all the crackers while leaving people of color vulnerable. Social justice, Ivy League style. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today we start at Cornell University, where privilege now means you are any race but white, at least when it comes to declining the flu shot due to historical injustices. And that's pretty much the story. So Cornell has decided that in their authoritarian way, everybody on campus will get no questions asked, a flu shot, or they will not be able to participate to some degree or other. Unless you're a BIPOC, bi person of color or indigenous person, then because it's so hard to be you, we'll let you decide if it's going to happen or not.
Yes, the Black, indigenous, people of color have a little out if they're like, you know what, based on history, although they would have to be told that history, most of those students will have no understanding of any sort of history relating back to any sort of vaccines or medicine. But at Cornell, they're saying that, yes, if you are BIPOC, you are the one who gets to be out of it. They said BIPOC students who are uncomfortable with the university's vaccine policy are encouraged to apply for an exemption to the requirement, which otherwise applies to all students and faculty members. Quote, Ithaca students with other concerns or extenuating circumstances may request an exemption from the fall 2020 flu vaccination requirement that is part of the university's COVID-19 Behavioral Compact, according to the website. They said that students who identify as Black, indigenous, or as a person of color may have personal concerns about fulfilling the compact requirements based on historical injustices and current events. See, they're also putting the current events there because they can't just look back at history. They have to also look only at what's happening today.
So you can't force them because evidently their history is full of force, but you can force everybody else. And it goes back to the question. I love the phrase identify as, right? So I suppose what's to stop people from identifying as BIPOC?
You know, just in general, vaccines in the United States have been contentious between various groups. And there are people with religious reasons. There are people just with personal reasons who don't want to take vaccines, period, on any level. And those people are viewed as being privileged.
Yeah, but you don't, again, like I said, there's no religious out for this. I suppose, I'm pretty sure if there were a group of Muslim students that said that their faith prohibited it, pretty sure Cornell would adapt that into the policy pretty quickly.
Basically, if you're a student at Cornell University, you should take a page out of Vanderbilt University's women's basketball team's page because they are not going to take it anymore. They're standing up. And rather, they're not standing up at all. They're sitting down or kneeling or doing whatever they're going to do in the locker room because they are not going to be out there for the national anthem for the entirety of the basketball season. And you may be saying, well, why? Why aren't they going to sing the national anthem or at least just stand there on the sidelines? It's because they are mourning and commemorating the racial injustices within the United States, in their words. They released a team statement on social media and they said, we are not just student athletes, and this is more than playing a game. Every time we put on a black and gold jersey, we feel the responsibility as ambassadors of our university, role models to young girls, and members of our community.
No one watches the WNBA. I mean, you have a league of professional basketballers made of women. Women don't support the league. Nobody watches it. People watch the NBA. That's a harsh reality. But guess what these people have figured out? Same thing with the women's soccer team, right? You got the women's soccer team, national team, who's destroying all these teams winning World Cups. Why? Because in Western culture, we treat women much better than in non-Western cultures. It's one thing to go beat up on Kenya and Nairobi, and all these teams that you beat up as a world's team, because in those countries, you don't have the kinds of opportunities there that we have here. It kind of blows your home narrative apart, right? That you're dominating a world where women aren't given equal access. The American women's team is good, is dominating, because there's a lot of teams out there from a lot of countries where they don't have the same facilities, the same amount of money's not lavished on them. Women's soccer is not taken at all seriously in some of these cultures, and so they have no support. And you beat the second and third class teams because they don't get the support you get as Americans. And then what do you come out and do because nobody watches the women's team necessarily? You complain about pay. You want more pay, right? Even though you already get paid a percentage higher than the men do. And here's the thing. Nobody watches what you do, so you're going to get attention somewhere else. You're going to use your tiny little platforms, and this includes the Warrior Women of Vanderbilt, right? Games that, I guarantee you, the attendance is 20% of what you get at the men's games? No one's paying attention to you? I'll bet you, if you asked 25 people, the first 25 people you bumped into on Vanderbilt campus, to name a single female basketball player, they won't be able to do it on that campus. But guess what? Now you get a voice for not coming out. Now you have international acclaim and you have nationwide coverage because you won't leave the locker room to come out for the flag, for the national anthem. All right, good. So you're just demonstrating that you're more important when you don't play than when you do, which is what we knew to begin with.
Vanderbilt continued, "We want to set the example, and we have made a commitment to be the change we want to see in the world." They put a little Mahatma Gandhi in there. "We have encouraged each other to volunteer, vote, and donate. We support each other in the pursuit of social justice and equity for all." Now, I know this Vanderbilt women's basketball team is full of college students who've learned nothing but these types of words, put them into a sentence, say them as a speech, and then you have to stand behind them. It's kind of interesting to note that this is nothing new at Vanderbilt. This is kind of what they do. The whole university, all teams, all students, and they knelt already back in October of 2017. So they've been doing it for a little while. I found it quite fascinating that at Vanderbilt, there are 16 in their D1, their Division I. There are 16 varsity teams, only 6 of them are men's, and 10 of them are women. So even on the Vanderbilt campus, there's more women's sports opportunities than there are for the guys.
Yeah, and that's Title IX, and no one's watching, so they have to get more attention this way. And I love that that womanifesto they turned out. Doesn't mention basketball at all. Right? This had nothing to do with sports. We're going to use this relatively small platform we have. Again, as Katie pointed out, a platform where more women's sports are offered every year than men. We're going to use this small platform to turn it into something about anything else but basketball because no one's paying attention.
And it was kind of fascinating. In September of 2003, so for 17 years now, Vanderbilt had actually disbanded their athletic department. So they don't have a full-fledged athletic department to kind of gear all their PR and what's happening at Vanderbilt. They've been in the news lately for several different things, including this. And so intercollegiate athletics are now administered as part of the university's Division of Student Life. And that oversees all student organizations and activities. So it makes perfect sense when you look at it that way, that they're not keeping athletics as athletics. They're putting in with all the other student organizations that have to abide by all the proper social justice norms and all that. So when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes sense that Vanderbilt's doing this even more so.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out, though, that you're also getting a benefit for not being a serious athlete, as you would say it, as your social justice bona fides come before your athleticism. But we're giving you a scholarship. That university is giving you a scholarship that other kids can't get. There are plenty of patriotic, America-loving kids who have not been suggestible or not been swamped under by your political values. What gives you the right to put your political values on them and get a scholarship to do so? It seems to me that if you want to turn women's basketball into a forum for social justice instead of a women's platform for athletics, then give back your scholarships. If you really are this tough sisterhood of women who are going to make your statement, then do it by giving up your scholarship. You should not have a scholarship that other kids can't get. Your scholarship is for your athletic ability. It's not for your politics. You've been given a platform because you can dribble a basketball, and you use that platform now to disenfranchise other kids on campus who can't get what you get because they can't dribble a basketball, and you've turned it into something else. You're dishonest. Give up your scholarships as a protest and then make your statement so there's an equal playing field. Or don't you believe in equal playing fields, Vanderbilt women's basketball team?
Well, here's the question of the day. Can you guess where universities have been getting billions, and I mean billions of dollars in donations? It's not from the United States. It's from various countries, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and of course, China. You're going to be hearing a lot about China these next 4 years, I'm sure. So the October U.S. Department of Education Office of the General Counsel released an institutional compliance with Section 117 of the Higher Education Act of 1965 report. So what does all that gobbledygook say? Well, it's a government way of saying that countries have been giving our universities billions of dollars for years and years and years in hopes of them then turning out their students from their own countries to go back, especially China, and get the information that the kids, well, now adults, learned when they were in the U.S. So basically, they're being payoffs. So according to the report, there have been $20 billion in foreign donations and contracts with American universities just between the years of 2014 and 2020. Isn't that exciting?
Who'd have thought that the scam that is multiculturalism wasn't about giving kids access to other cultures and to teaching these insular American kids how myopic their perspective of the world is, exposing them to the breadth of diversity across the world. No, it's a chance for foreign governments hostile to the United States and its way of life and its constitutional values, foreign countries that are hostile to us, a platform to change policy. You American college administrators have sold your souls, but again, like I said, it doesn't really matter to you, right? Your money is money for all the preaching of Marxism on college campuses, and Marxism is preached nowhere more than on college campuses. There's no place in the free world today, the what used to be the free world today. There is no place where Marxism is more lauded, less criticized, more assumed, more bullied, has more of a bully pulpit than universities. And yet you're willing to take these huge multi-billion-dollar payoffs from foreign governments who want to unmake American freedom and liberty. And you have no conscience about doing it whatsoever, and yet you pretend this somehow has to do with, this is exposing our children to life outside of America, outside of the evil bubble of capitalism, even as you're lining your own stinking pockets with it. It's exactly what I would expect from every university administrator I've met in my 27 years teaching, from the beginning to the end of my career.
So of that $20 billion, these gifts that were received, more than $3 billion actually came from Qatar, which is known for being the biggest backer of Muslim Brotherhood. And then you have $1.1 billion that is from Saudi Arabia. And of course, China has gotten or given about $1.5 billion. And now, as the report states, at least some of these foreign sources are hostile to the United States and are targeting their investments, these gifts, contracts, to project soft power, steal sensitive and proprietary research, and spread propaganda. Again, this is coming from the government's report. Yet the department is very concerned by evidence suggesting the higher education industry's solicitation of foreign sources has not been appropriately or effectively balanced or checked by the institutional controls needed to meaningfully measure the risk and manage the threat posed by a given relationship, donor, or foreign venture. In other words, these countries are giving our universities all this money, and our universities, instead of being, smart about it and actually reporting it, questioning it, not taking the money at all, are like, okay, just give it to us and we won't tell anyone. Shh.
Yeah, the word solicitation has another context, doesn't it? It means whore. Right? Whoring yourself out. It's exactly what the universities are doing for this money. And look, it's a twofer, right? You're the typical second-class thinker that ends up being a university administrator. You come from, you work your way up the college administration from being a math professor, being a sociology professor, a psychology professor. And how do you get to the top tiers? By being more progressive, more liberal, and more mindlessly woke than your other colleagues. That's the payoff, right? So you get yourself in these offices, and now the money comes trickling in, and you're not the least bit bothered by that, because you can just pretend that this has to do with everything about internationalism, when indeed you are, as the report said, you are soliciting this money from places like China. You are whoring yourselves out, even as you spit Marxist platitudes from both sides of your two-faced heads.
If you want a specific example of that, we're going to take a look at the whoringness of Georgetown and Harvard, which their data goes back to 2005 in terms of them finding evidence of them getting this money. They each got $20 million to support Islamic studies on their respective campuses. The report actually says the main concern is with Georgetown University specifically and their Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. According to the report, the center could advance Islamic ideology in a fashion that belittles opposition, threatens academic integrity, and improperly influences future civil servants. The center also received criticism for deceptively labeling itself as pluralistic. Isn't that every story we've ever talked about? When it's all in the name of inclusivity and plurality and we're all in this together, but really they're going just very specifically, and in this instance, they're going specifically for Islam.
Yeah, Georgetown's one of those fake Christian colleges that we've talked about multiple times on this show, so-called Jesuit Christians. When you hear the word Jesuit and Christianity, just assume that they have nothing to do with each other anymore. The fraud pope that's in the Vatican now is exactly this kind of fraud, a fever swamp Latin American Marxist pretending to be a Christian. You got the same thing going on with our so-called Catholic institutions like Georgetown, which of course, right, is taking all this money to sell out Christianity. How many stories have we done over the last few years about abortion rights on Georgetown University? How Georgetown was silencing dissent with regards to conservative voices, conservative Christian voices, traditional Catholic voices, Georgetown University being slammed shut while they're taking all this money from Islamic countries. Typical Jesuit posturing nonsense.
It's time for some real education. Odd Nerdrum is considered one of the greatest living figurative painters. Primarily influences by painters Rembrandt and Caravaggio, help place his work in direct conflict with the abstraction and conceptual art considered acceptable in much of Norway and Sweden today. Nerdrum creates 6 to 8 paintings a year, and he says that his art should be understood as kitsch rather than art as such.
So this guy is different than most of the art installation nonsense that we've seen. We've looked over the last couple of weeks at some of these art. Last week we did a story on Bad Dog, a great big 28-foot Labrador retriever peeing on the side of a museum in Orange County. That's kitsch, right? That's what kitsch is. It's not really art. It's a parody of art. It's an appropriation of art. In a way, Sabo, the great conservative raconteur out in California, is very much a kitsch artist, right? He's turning the artistic tropes against the establishment. And that has political usefulness, but it's to what degree you can call it art is highly debatable. But the thing about Odd Nerdrum is that he actually does have some talent. Take a look at some of his pictures here. What you're getting here is, I'm not even sure I would call this particular image kitsch. It's a particular, the painting is pretty haunting. The techniques are really kind of interesting. There's a kind of gauzy quality, the sfumato quality that you see in the paintings of Da Vinci, which may be partially what's happening here. Kind of an unveiled Mona Lisa. The blood on the lips highly suggestive of all sorts of possibilities. And what I'm trying to get at here, for a kitsch artist, guy's got some talent. I mean, this is not just somebody who's blowing up 40-foot inflatable dog poos like happened in outside European museums about 10 years ago. This takes some effort and some artistic vision. Take a look at the next picture. Same thing here. This is very much in the tradition, I think, of Da Vinci and possibly Michelangelo. Is this a Mona Lisa who is brought her child to the table? There's a certain intensity of the stare that is, I think, calculated to undercut that enigmatic smile that you get from Mona Lisa herself with terror, the look on the child's face. This is right out of this. It takes a lot of talent. It is not easy to paint tropes even like this in Da Vincian ways. And yet, it's hard sometimes to even see how I could see how you might call this kitsch, particularly looking at the face of the child. But there's more going on here, that this is a real artist who is using his artistic technique. In the teaser, the opening, Katie mentioned that Rembrandt also had this gauzy look in his painting. Rembrandt always worked in these colors. These browns, these grays, these golds were just major figures, major paint combinations in his palette. And you see it here too. It takes a lot of talent to be able to mimic those paintings at a high level, even if you're twisting them towards kitsch. So when we think about Odd Nerdrum, he's even got one of those names. He's got one of those names, Odd Nerdrum, that you would think would be a perfect nom de plume for some kind of a gutter Skype, some guy running around and just giving the middle finger to the art establishment. But he's a lot more complicated than that. His paintings in themselves, which are inspired again by Rembrandt, by Da Vinci, by Caravaggio, there's some really wonderful paintings that he has in his kitsch collection. That thunderstroke of darkness and out of which light emerges that you get in some of Nerdrum's paintings are worthy of serious study study on their own, regardless of what the kitsch factor is. Nerdrum was born in Sweden in 1944, but lived almost his adult life. He considers himself to be a Norwegian now. He's considered one of the greatest living figurative painters. Themes and style in his work reference anecdote and narrative. Primary influences by the painters Rembrandt and Caravaggio helped to place his work in direct conflict in the abstract art of the modern era. Kitsch painting, as he calls it, is an international movement that is made up of classical painters. So you've got some serious painters here. A direct result of a 24 September 1998 speech given by Odd Nerdrum, which was later clarified in his book on kitsch with John Ove Tuve and others. So it's a serious movement that makes serious political statements, but starts with classical artistic tropes and themes. Give me that any day. Give me a real artist who is choosing to twist art in real ways than what you get in mostly modern American art, where you get political actors, one-trick pony social justice warriors pretending to be artists to make trite political points.
All right, before we go, just a reminder that the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So just take a few moments today and start following at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. Now, we want to take a moment to show some of the love to our Patriot Club members. Today, we're going to give a shout out to Debbie from Waxhaw, North Carolina, down there in North Carolina. Debbie, thank you so much for supporting us and watching the show. And if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you an awesome tumbler with just a teensy-weensy little thank you. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. Babies, little babies, actually have more bones than adults. There are about 300 tiny bones that you have at birth. I'm sure you don't remember that. But then your bones will fuse together, and that leaves you as an adult then with just 206 bones.
And that's our show for today. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.